Farrell, do I have you now?
You have me now, Balky.
Excellent. All right. Glad to hear it. We're in December. This is our first show of December of 2021.
Yeah.
How are your teams looking as we are coming into the stretch run of the fantasy football season?
You know what? I got a couple that snuck into the playoffs with a fourth seed, and I got one or two that were moving out. I've got a top 100 team co-owned with my great friend Jeff Joaquin in the main event, and most of my other teams are doing well in the that are doing well are in the football guys, and I'm just very excited about this week and hopefully moving through the head-to-head process of the playoffs and getting some teams into the championships. It's a very, very exciting time of the year.
Yeah, it definitely is. And we got Kentucky League Championships this weekend. We have FFPC and Football Guys playoffs going on. And then in a couple of weeks, the sprint will be on for all of them as we all three of those big contests will give away some pretty hefty grand prizes coming up. And we're going to help you get there, hopefully, tonight. We're going to talk about Taysom Hill's viability as a championship round starter. We're going to talk about whether Tyler Higbee should be benched this weekend in favor of another guy named Tyler. And then Mark Fischer is actually going to drop by to talk about his fifth-place Football Guys Players Championship regular season finisher, as well as why he's rostering 4 defenses on that squad, and much, much, much more. Shout out to the chat room right now. Feel free to post any questions you might have in there. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, you can do so at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman. And, of course, check out Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. Facebook.com/HSFF Hour is where to reach us if you want to chime in and talk with us. Please give us a call, 347-426-3682. That's 347-GAME-OVA. High-stakes fantasy football at gmail.com is where to reach us via email. If you have any questions, get them into us tonight, right now. We're going to try to get to all the chat room questions, all the tweets that come up, and all the emails we get in fantasy feedback later on in the show, thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend Bryce and our producer and mutual friend Rob. Former FFPC main event league winner and varsity league winner Larry Weinauer was on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown with yours truly this week. Check that out, rotoviz.com/podcast. A lot of good stuff for Larry in there, who's also sitting at 20th place overall currently in the FFPC main event. And Farrell, big news. I just saw this. I thought it was going to be this show. It happened actually last show. We have now topped 800,000 listens in show history. That streams, downloads, everything. Over 800,000 times have people listened to this program now. You've been a big part of it, man. So I'm giving you congratulations because this is a huge milestone for the show.
Thank you, Balky. That is a fantastic number. And, you know, we're not competing against any other show. We're just kind of competing with ourselves. We want to get a little better every week and help more players enjoy fantasy football and maybe end up in the winner's circle. And speaking of the winner's circle, Balky, well, I'm going to throw that question back at you. But before I ask that question, I got to tell you, it's so great listening to you talk. You go from second to fifth gear. You don't grind the gears. You go right into it. It's downhill all the way. It's very impressive. It rumbles like a Ferrari, much like your teams are running through the KFFSC. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your success? Because you're having a great deal of it.
Yeah, I think the only ancillary league that I played in KFFSC that I missed the playoffs in was the one where I only had one bidding dollar left to start the season. I think I made it in all my dynasty leagues there. Made it in the auction, the millionaire or the checkered flag, as well as the run to daylight. 2 of those in each of those contests in the playoffs. I had 3 main event teams make the playoffs. I still have one fighting for a league championship this week. We'll see what happens. So it's an exciting time, and definitely got some contenders there, and might be able to sneak in a couple of wild cards into the Kentucky main event championship round as well. That will be seen shortly, hopefully. I do want to throw it out to a FFPC/KFFSC player who's hanging out in the chat room right now. Now, it's Hudson Kern-Reeve, and the professor says he is supervising his kids and their friends tonight, so he'll be in or out. He's in to ask this question right away. He's got a tight end question on the FFPC, Farrell. Pat Freiermuth, who is going to be at home against the Baltimore Ravens, or Foster Moreau from your Las Vegas Raiders, who are also at home taking on the WFT Farrell, you have any insight on which tight end you would rather play this weekend?
That's why the professor's a champion, because he's got decisions like this. Whichever one he makes, he can't go wrong. Foster's going to have a good game. Against the Washington Football Club, I would suspect without Waller, naturally, that's why he's playing, but with all the need to have a short, successful passing game, they'll have it. But you take Freiermuth. Freiermuth has ended up being the number one red zone target for Pittsburgh, and he is certainly in a situation that he's developed that relationship with the quarterback. He gets open and he makes the tough catches. It's hard to believe when you watch that player that he's a rookie. So I don't know what to tell Hud other than to play him. He should figure out a way to play them both. That's what he should do. And based on all the late injuries that are being announced, it might be a necessity.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. When we look at this situation right now, I think as far as if it were to come down to me, it seems like Freiermuth is totally out of the concussion protocol. He was carrying no injury designation, so we're looking like he's going to be good to go. I think I'd lean that way. I think you're right. I think they both have good games, but Freiermuth seems to be the guy that Roethlisberger is looking in the red zone and in the end zone. And when you have arm strength that's being sapped like Ben Roethlisberger's is, I think that's a huge benefit to guys like Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson at the expense, unfortunately, of Chase Claypool. So I think I would go with Freiermuth there, and we'll have to go with we'll get Kern's roster here, and maybe we can finagle a way to get both those tight ends in his lineup.
That's what needs to happen. That's what it is.
Let's go into talk about the New England Patriots to lead things off here on the Fantasy Flash, Farrell. Matthew Fairbairn from The Athletic says that the Patriots should not be afraid to run the ball against Buffalo. Now, the rush defense, the stats are decent, actually, for Buffalo. Only 5 teams allow fewer rushing yards per game, and 6 teams have seen fewer rushing attempts against them in 2021. The Bills, however, when they go up against the elite run defenses, it's not been good. Derrick Henry, 143 yards and 3 touchdowns in Week 6. Jonathan Taylor, 185 rushing yards and 5 total touchdowns in Week 11. You have an offensive line in New England that's getting back to full health, and you have a 1-2 punch now with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Each of them have 21 carries over the team's last two games, and you also have Brandon Bolden, who's mixing it up on third downs here, Farrell. But for me, I think Damian Harris makes for a very nice flex this week. What about Ramondre Stevenson for you? Is that a guy that you can convince yourself to being started in some football guys leagues and some FFPC main event leagues?
It takes a little convincing to me, and you teased it, Balky. We talked about this offensive line a few weeks ago. You're right, they are back to full health because Trent Brown has returned, and they sent a very, very good player to the bench. Michael Onwenu is coming off the bench, and he's playing about 30 plays at 3 different offensive line positions. And this is the same thing. You say there's no Jonathan Taylor on the New England Patriots. There doesn't have to be, because what the Patriots have in common with the Colts is a superior offensive line that's playing as one. You got 5 guys there. They're playing as a unit, and they're playing as one very substantial football entity that are opening up these opportunities for these running backs to take advantage of. Definitely look at these running backs for this game. It's a big weekend in the Canadian Football League for me in the world of player agenting, which I do there, and I'm looking at the fact that in Hamilton, Ontario, which is 70 miles as the crow flies up from Buffalo, 90% chance of rain, wind gusts 20 to 30 miles per hour. Its Bills have a terrific defensive line. Oliver, Hughes, Addison, excellent ball players on both sides of the ball, and that's where this game is going to be won. And I believe that whatever has to be done at the quarterback position, these guys will be successful. But they're going to depend on a run game to deliver the game for them. And I think all of us would agree the Patriots have the better rushing attack.
Farrell, do I have you back now?
Oh, I am back. And I'm still
Okay,
babbling on. And I'm still babbling on about the New England offensive line. You know, I didn't miss a beat. I just kept talking.
Well, let me ask you, Odell Beckham and Van Jefferson. Yeah, he's battling an issue right now with his hip and his back, and I'm just kind of wondering how you feel about not only trotting him out there. It sounds like Sean McVay said he was going to be surprised if he didn't play this week, so I think he's going to be out there. But the fact that he's battling with this injury, is it something that would make you like Van Jefferson in your starting lineups a little bit more, with knowing that Beckham is battered?
Yeah, it's. I don't own Beckham anywhere, so I don't have to make that decision. Those of you that are wrestling with it understand that his mind tends to go first and his body goes second. When his body is compromised, I don't think he's a part of this offense that's going to make a huge difference. He flashed, he scored, he did some things. I don't think that it is going to be consistent as we move on. Van Jefferson has been consistent in that he's caught 3 or 4 balls on the targets that he's gotten. He's dropped some balls. He's run some incorrect routes. He's playing like a young player does. But one of these days he's going to have a breakout game, especially if someone does cause a situation where Kupp does not have his normal game. I don't know who's going to do that, but if somebody's going to have to, if you're going to keep the Rams passing game out of the end zone. So yes, I really like Jefferson here in this game.
We have our guest coming up, Mark Fischer, the 5th place finisher in the Football Guys Players Championship regular season, coming up in just 1 minute. Before we get to him, I do want to bring up one other thing, and that is Taysom Hill's performance in Thursday Night Football. 19 out of 41, 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 picks. He also got 101 yards on the ground. I guess you look at Taysom Hill here, Farrell, as a potential championship winner or a potential championship derailer, right, with all the interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
But the dude threw 2 of them. He got 101 yards on the ground. What about him as a potential championship round starter here as we go forward and look at what he could do and his potential to bring home the title to many teams around the country?
I root for him. I like him. Mallet finger is an awful sounding injury, and that's what he's suffering from. You can't be successful throwing the ball. That's what led to his interceptions. He doesn't see the field that well. You can't see the field when you're moving around like that. It's interesting. Lamar Jackson throws 4 interceptions. Taysom Hill throws 4 interceptions. One of them actually managed to win, and as you would expect, New Orleans dropped the game to Dallas based on those turnovers. He throws some good balls. He does some nice things. I think there's better answers at quarterback down the way to a championship. He's not going to run for 100 yards against every team that he plays. His body won't handle it, and probably the defenders won't be able to combine with a pass rush and a pass coverage, just because the Dallas defense was absolutely fantastic in that game.
That is our Fantasy Flash for this week, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back with more news and notes around the NFL coming up on next week's program. Right now, I do want to get to our guest tonight. He started playing fantasy football a decade ago. His brother is the one who introduced him to the game. This is his 3rd year playing in the FFPC. Says he attributes his success to the countless hours his wife watched his kids so he could do research. He is a native of Virginia Beach, Virginia, currently resides in L.A. with his wife and 2 kids, also residing in both 5th place in the 2021 Football Guys Players Championship, as well as on these very same airwaves tonight. Please welcome into the program Mr. Mark Fischer. Mark, thanks so much for joining us this evening, man.
Who's Mark?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming through loud and clear, man. 5th place in the regular season. I know we still got several weeks to go. You got to feel real good about that team, though, coming into December, man.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate the invite. Excited to be here. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that I got to 5th place. I have been playing this, like you said, for a couple of years. And this is definitely the highlights so far, and then, we'll see what happens as we move towards those last couple of weeks.
Does your brother have any stake in any of these teams, or are these just solely owned by you, Mark?
Oh yeah, they're solely me. He does a lot of other stuff, but not joining in on the high stakes. That's just for
Got
me.
it. Okay, so listen, we're going to get into fantasy football because we definitely want to pick your brain. Congrats on getting up to 5th place in the FPC right now, but when you are not researching, when you are not dominating the Football Guys Players Championship, what are you doing to spend your time out in Los Angeles for a living?
Yeah, so I am actually a healthcare administrator for Kaiser Permanente. It's a large health system out here in California, as well as some other states, including DC. And so in that arena, I oversee all of our anesthesia services. So any type of the anesthesia that we give at one of our local hospitals here, that is the job that I do, is make sure that everything runs smoothly. I've been here for about 9 years, and prior to that, I worked as an attorney in Washington, D.C. before I moved out here to California.
Good job, man. That's an important job in the world, because if you're not successful, it doesn't matter if anything else is. So that's great, man. An attorney that's now working in the medical field. I've got a lineup question for you, but you said something to me that is very interesting. Your wife spent time with the kids where you could spend your time researching. I find that a lot of people come to fantasy football, they realize the level of competition. They become researchers 1, 2, 3 years in. Did you come into high-stakes fantasy football with the idea that you were more than ready, more than well prepared? Did you know that you had to be that? Sounds like from your background, you sound like a very well-organized guy, that the answer just might be to the affirmative.
Well, I mean, I think partly. I think, I have been playing in these other leagues for a while. I think I was looking for additional competition, I would say. But when I came into high stakes the first year, didn't really research tight end premium. So I got handed to me in no short order for the first year, but quickly decided that meant that I had to go back and really look at it. And so I think last year and then this year is when I really kind of turned up the heat in terms of research. So didn't plan on actually doing it. I thought, hey, I can, be this casual fantasy football player who just happens to be lucky. And then I realized quickly that in a high stakes league with this many people, you really have to get down to the nitty gritty and try to find those sweet points that other people may miss. So
those competitive instincts took over, and I love that. Looking at your roster, and there's a trend, and I know that you were aware of tight end premium in the FFPC. You just don't know what that looks like until you sit down and draft, and you become aware of it very quickly. That if you're not prepared to get yours, that most everything is off and gone. One of the trends this year that I've heard fantasy players talk about to play in the FFPC is not to have a backup running back as a flex player, to try to have an explosive wide receiver in your flex spots. And we have the dual flex, so I suppose we're talking about two. I see that you have one of my favorite players that I have always wanted to have a bigger piece of the pie, a bigger part of the running game. Now, I understand that since we prepared for the show, there's been more information to come out about this player and his availability for the weekend. But the giant killer is Mr. Boston Scott of the Philadelphia Eagles. 5'6", 200 pounds. And I just love it when he plays, and I always wonder why he doesn't play more. What do you like about this player, and will you be going forward with him in your lineup at a flex spot as you make this run towards your Football Guys Championship?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think, you're spot on, I think, with the feeling on Boston Scott. Look at him last week. He kind of stepped up and with Sanders sort of being hurt, jumped in there and besides that pretty bad fumble at the end there, had a good day. Mm-hmm. And I think, it seems like the coaches like Boston Scott. I mean, I think even when Sanders wasn't hurt, he was still seeing a good amount of time and getting some of the touches in. And so, yeah, like you said, this week now hasn't practiced all week. So with that illness, which is a little bit of a concern, but and with Sanders coming off the injury report, he'll probably get the bulk of the carries. But it is a nice matchup with the Jets. And so if he does get out there and Gainwell perhaps gets inactive again, which would indicate that he will be sort of the solely backup, depending on how he looks in the morning and what the reports are on him. I think I like my chances with him. I think he can do some even with limited touches from what we've seen, and with the passing as well. So I right now I'm going to roll with him until Deebo Samuel comes back. Hopefully, not too long from now. But
come on back, Deebo.
Yeah, exactly. So for now, I'm going to use him as my fill-in unless he's inactive, and then I got to turn to Tyler Conklin from Minnesota to fill that last spot.
Mark, we don't often see this. I mean, I've seen, some teams with 3 defenses before. It's been a while since I've seen someone with 4 defenses on a team, especially a team this high up on the leaderboard. So you're dedicating 20% of your roster essentially to defenses. You have the Colts, the Cardinals, the Dolphins, and the Vikings. Can you tell us a little bit about the rationale of why you want all 4 of those defenses on your team at this point in time, at least?
Yeah, sure. I was looking at, coming into this week, pretty much having a lot of my lineup set, where I'm not, I'm past the buys. I do have the one injury with Deebo Samuel, but for the most part, if he gets back, I'm looking at weeks 15, 16, 17 and saying, points are at a premium, and which we obviously all know. And so where is the one spot where I think I could have used some points? I think last week I had, I put Chicago in instead of Miami, and Chicago got me 3 points, and Miami gets 24 on the bench. So those 21 points would have been nice. And so it got me thinking, well, am I going to hold on to a player, a wide receiver, somebody that I probably won't get into my lineup over the next couple of weeks, or get somebody like a defense where then I have the whole week to kind of really look and see who I think is going to kind of pop off versus who's not. And so that's where I just looked at the who everybody's playing over the next couple of weeks, and you named some pretty good defenses there, the Colts and the Cardinals and the Dolphins. So I'm going to try to see how that plays out over the end of the season.
So see, you're starting Boston Scott maybe. You're playing the wrong defenses. Everybody's listening to this and going, so I do all these things too, but this guy's in 5th place. What has been the key to success? Maybe it is because of what you've done on the waiver wire. And I have I've picked up one of these players frequently myself. I did not have the budget to compete for the other one, but they are, of all things, on the Tennessee Titans. And who thought with the Tennessee Titans we would be talking about wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and running back Dontrell Hilliard, who I will remind everyone about Dontrell Hilliard. When he was released from Cleveland at the very about this time last year, he was picked up by Houston, and Houston did not hang on to him throughout this year. And we all know what they're doing at the running back position. Hilliard, Westbrook-Ikhine, both of them on your roster. Which one excites you? And congratulations for picking up points that perhaps no one else could see.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously with what happened last week, I lean towards Hilliard, only because it's it really shows Tennessee's commitment to the run game. I was surprised with them being down against New England to see them still putting Hilliard and Foreman out there rather than having Tannehill throw. And so what I see is the potential here. We obviously saw Hilliard break off that great run, but the week prior with his catching ability, it's something where I think even if he were to continue to be that split carries with Foreman, to be able to get the yardage on the ground, which Tennessee obviously was able to do with Henry, and then has been able to do now in his absence at least a little bit. I would continue to roll with him. I actually put Westbrook in last week instead of Hilliard again, thinking more along the lines of they're going to be down, it's going to be negative game script, so they're going to have Tannehill throw. And he didn't actually. I mean, I think he threw 21 times, and they ran the ball 30-something times. So they definitely leaned heavily on the run game despite being down. And so I'm glad to have them both, though. I'm glad to have a choice. I think, I mean, there wasn't that much of volume there, but Westbrook was the guy who got the touchdown. He had, the targets, the looks. So while I would lean towards Hilliard and go with that, it's nice to have Westbrook as well to kind of, as we mentioned, to fill that last spot. When they get back next week between a Boston Scott, a Hilliard, and a Westbrook, it's a choice that I am glad that I have on the teams to kind of make and see if it pays dividends in the end.
The fifth place finisher in the regular season of the Football Guys Players Championship 2021 version is Mark Fischer. He joins us on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour tonight. Let's talk a little bit about the Seahawks running backs, and maybe it will be a little bit because with Adrian Peterson now signing with the Seahawks, Mark, does this just slam the door on being able to start any Seahawks running back going forward? We know Chris Collins is on IR. He's going to miss the remainder of the season. Alex Collins is doing next to nothing when he gets the opportunity. DJ Dallas, Travis Homer not really making waves. And now you have Peterson to gum up the works. Is it just best for high-stakes owners to say no to Seattle running backs going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's surprising to see what Seattle has become in the short time since Wilson's been back. I mean, like you mentioned, Collins had the chance, seemed to be the guy, but hasn't done much of anything over the past couple of weeks. And then you're throwing Peterson in there. I mean, does he change much? I don't think so. I think they were kind of fading away, so to speak, before that. I think now it's just you add, Rashad Penny coming back when he gets, if he gets healthy ever. Homer coming back. You're looking at a handful of guys who you just can't. You don't know what's going to happen with any of them. I mean, I think they're just, it's sort of somewhere that I don't want to be in the mix of those type of running backs. I think if it were me, I'd rather look for some backups that, with the injuries sort of may be able to come in. I mean, Jared Patterson in Washington, or I think they mentioned Smallwoods over there that take over for McKissick. And then even, Jamar Jefferson with Detroit. It's something where I would much rather look towards those guys than try to figure out the Seattle backfield, as well as just kind of the team in general.
I think that's an answer that everyone in fantasy football would agree with you. I think you got 90% support rate on that, and everybody else either lives in Seattle or is related to some of the backfield, which they could be because it's a big backfield. But I'm going to double down with Seattle. I'm going to ask you to step up and tell me if I, on my one team that managed to get into the playoffs, with DK Metcalf on the roster, should I throw in the towel? Should I give up? If I've got anything, I've got other players on my roster. They're nowhere near going to touch what my aspirations and expectations were for DK Metcalf. But I watched him against Washington Football Club, And I think, well, if I can't throw the ball to him, I'm going to use him in a jet sweep. I'm going to put – it was just nothing. And I don't know. I think he ended up with one, maybe two catches. Okay, so there's my question. DK Metcalf, is he still in one of your lineups? And even if you don't have him, advise the listeners as what you would do with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's somebody. I mean, it's DK Metcalf. I mean, it's hard to think about benching somebody like that, but it's understandable given sort of the way he's been used recently. And I think it is something that speaks of sort of how Seattle is being run so far. I mean, it was Lockett who was getting the air yards last week against Washington. But earlier in the season it was Metcalf who was, before Russell Wilson got injured, or even when Geno Smith was there. And so I see it as sort of he's volatile. He's volatile like Lockett is. We already know Lockett's a roller coaster of a wide receiver there.
Yeah.
And so I look at Metcalf and is he going to be the same type of player now? At least in this season, I think it's hard though to bench him because of the upside when you look at the talent and then the chance to have that upside. It's hard to kind of sit that because you go off of last week and you sit him, and then this week, and I don't know who they're playing this week, but I imagine if there's a get right game coming out of a one catch performance, it may be this week or next week, and it's something where if you can hang on to him. It's the Niners, so they got a decent defense, although I think some of their players are injured. So I would be hard pressed to sit DK Metcalf. I just don't know who you would play over him if you've got that type of talent on your roster. Then and that's why you made it the playoffs, then I think you do sit him. But for most people, it's probably going to be something where you have to play him and kind of hope for the best in terms of Wilson, coming back around and then really targeting Metcalf in a way that he hasn't so far.
Mark, Rashad Bateman, this is a guy that started off slow. He's come on in Baltimore. Why should high-stakes owners, or should high-stakes owners, be bullish on this guy's upcoming performances for the remainder of the season? How do you feel about Bateman right now?
I like Bateman. He's underwhelmed so far in the last couple of weeks, but I think if anybody's watched the Ravens, I think everybody has, especially, since when Jackson got sick and was out a couple of weeks ago. But there's a reason why he was talked about highly coming into the season before draft, before he got injured, in terms of what he could bring to that Baltimore offense. I know that I was one that I tried to target him in my leagues. A number of my other teams, including the ones that I have that are also in the playoffs, I'm starting him. There's something about somewhere. I know that they're a run-heavy defense, or offense, but somebody's got to complement Brown and Andrews. Watkins isn't that guy. I don't think Duvernay is okay, but I think Bateman is the guy. And so, he's a rookie. He's gonna take time, and we're looking something like Jamar Chase, where he was going off, and then all of a sudden he's gone quiet. But it doesn't mean that he can't just kind of come back on strong. And so, is Bateman a Jamar Chase, or is Baltimore or Cincinnati? No, but again, like with Metcalf, if the opportunity and the talent are there, it's just you just need that one breakout game or that one chance where I think if he catches a touchdown or two here or there in the last couple of weeks, people will be singing a different tune in terms of talking about Bateman being a good guy to use coming down the line in sort of a flex spot. So I like Bateman. I think people should be bullish on him. I mean, if he's out there, I would pick him up, and I wouldn't be afraid to use him over some of these other guys.
And you know what? He's got a quarterback that threw 4 picks last week and was still out there spinning it. So you You gotta love it. They're going to do with the quarterback exactly what they're going to do. Waiver wires are pretty thin this week. There was still some value there. I looked at it, as typically you would happen where I didn't make the playoffs. I looked at the waiver wire and I see players that were attractive to me, and where I made the playoffs just seemed to be just a vast desert of unfulfilled potential. So is there anyone that you went hard for in this week 13 and maybe you don't want to tip your hand because we do have waiver wires forthcoming over the next 2 weeks, but can you tell us anybody that you think you picked up this week that is going to be a difference maker, or at least you'll have ready in case you need it?
Well, I mean, as we talked about before, I went hard on the defenses. So those were who I targeted this week because I didn't see a lot on the waiver wire, at least in my fifth place team. But there were a couple I think that I would have gone after had I needed sort of to use Foster Moreau for a week or try to pick up Odula. The regular guys that I think everybody went after that, you probably had to throw up a lot of money for. But, I think one guy that I wasn't available in my leagues, I think I picked him up a couple weeks ago, but Matt Breida out of Buffalo.
There you go.
Has certainly changed the script in terms of kind of pushing Zach Moss out. And, Buffalo's never committed to Devin Singletary. And so he certainly looks like a guy that it'll be interesting to watch what he does down the stretch. Again, I don't have him on my teams. I think maybe one or two here that I try to pick him up, but he was already picked up. So people obviously knew faster than me about him. But that would be somebody that if he were available, I would have gone really hard on him. Because I think, you always wanted to have a piece of Buffalo, I think, and certainly if Matt Breida starts becoming the guy, people are going to be happy that they picked him up.
A piece of Buffalo, I love it. Let me ask you this real quick. You said you went hard on defenses. How many defenses are you carrying?
So I have the 4 in this league.
You said 4
on this team. Yeah,
4 defenses. 4 defenses.
Yeah,
Balky,
and then
have
on
you
the other
ever
ones
heard a man more suited to play in the KFFSC than Mark? I mean, it's 4 defenses the man has. I am very impressed, sir. Good job.
And I will say this too: if there's anybody who could enter the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship and dominate right away, it is our defense expert, Mark Fischer, for sure, to be able to ascertain the proper defense to play on any given week to go with his already stellar starting lineup. You are set up for success in the KFFSC should you decide to choose to enter that. All right, let's get to a couple of emails here for you, Mark, from listeners. First one is from Paul in Gardena, California. He says, how do you feel about Gabriel Davis the rest of the way? Paul, thank you for the email, and thanks for listening. Gabriel Davis, part of an elite offense that maybe hasn't been performing so elite lately. But what about Gabriel Davis as a potential flex guy the rest of the way? Is there any juice there? Is there any anything that you like about being able to start Gabriel Davis or maybe just roster him to see what happens?
I mean, I certainly would have wanted to see Gabriel Davis come on this season, but I think after they picked up Emmanuel Sanders, I haven't seen much of from him. I mean, it seems like it's been Diggs, Sanders, Beasley, Knox. I mean, I don't know where Gabriel Davis even is in terms of his numbers, but certainly, again, like I just mentioned, anybody who plays for Buffalo has an opportunity. But is he anything that is going to do anything? I wouldn't count on it, but I don't know. I mean, maybe he could do something. But I look at the other guys that are on the team, and I think they're well ahead of him in terms of the depth chart. So I wouldn't do anything on my team for him.
One other one, Mark. This is Ray in Scranton, PA. He writes, what's up, Mark? Is Darrell Henderson worth the wait on Sunday afternoon? I have to either play him then or Tevin Coleman in the early game. Congrats on the regular season finish. That is Ray in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Yeah, this is kind of interesting when you look at the situation brewing here for Ray's team. So Darrell Henderson has a 425 game this week against Jacksonville. It's a good matchup. And as far as I can tell, when I looked at the practice reports for Henderson this week, I don't know if I can glean anything from it, right? I mean, Henderson listed as questionable, limited in Friday's practice. I would think that he's trending in the right direction, but you're also risking a zero because if his only other option is Tevin Coleman, Coleman plays in the 1 o'clock game. So how would you handle this if this were your team, Mark?
Well, I mean, it is my team. I mean, I do have Henderson in my flex spot. So I certainly am kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing with Boston Scott. I got to look and see, what reports are coming out tomorrow. Once we get to Sunday morning, see if I can glean anything. I'm more of a risk averse guy. So if Tevin Coleman, we just talked about he's playing against the Eagles. I don't know. That'd be tough. I mean, I'd really have to see though. I think if it sounds like Henderson's going to play and there's a chance he plays even if he's not 100% and they lean on Michelle Moore, I probably would still want to do that. But again, being a risk-averse guy, if I hear anything where it seems to be an indication that he's going to not play or not suit up, and I only have a choice at 1 o'clock, I'm going to go with Tevin Coleman. And I may be kicking myself later, but it worries me when
Tevin Coleman's self-regulated kick. Yeah, it happens. So let me ask you this: being a risk-averse guy, you probably are the best suited guy to answer this question. There's not a lot of sleepers out there, but we'd like you to find one for us. And we really want him to be a sleeper. And we talked about a lot of guys that might fill that role, but I want to know who the best sleeper is that you could get into your lineup this weekend. And then is there a stud? Perhaps it was Ezekiel Elliott who turned in a 6-point performance this week. Is there a stud that you can say, I counted on him all year, but I just can't count on him this weekend? We talked about Metcalf. Is there anyone else out there that you would like to alert the listeners to avoid in their lineups this weekend?
So the stud question, I don't know that I would necessarily avoid this person, but a guy that I am a little bit more concerned about than his performances have been is Jalen Waddle out of Miami. I mean, he went off last week, and I think people that have been using him, I think he's up to wide receiver 14 or something like that, like really high up there. But my concern is that when if Devontae Parker comes back, obviously it's not Waddle. He's been great, but his usage has dramatically changed when Parker's been in the lineup versus when he's out. I mean, the last time that they played together on Halloween on the 31st, or somewhere around there, Waddle had 4 receptions for 29 yards. The game before that, he had 3 receptions for 33 yards. So, not putting up nearly the numbers he had when Parker's been out. I mean, 70 yards, 83, 65, and then, of course, last week, 137. So it's not necessarily that I would bench him, but I would definitely temper my expectations and kind of, really see if Parker does play, kind of how that changes the dynamic for Waddle in terms of his usage. And him putting up the numbers that he's been putting up since Parker's been out. And then on the other end, though, the sleeper that I think that may no longer be considered a sleeper, or may be considered a sleeper. Javonte Williams out of Denver, with Melvin Gordon not playing. I think this is a great opportunity for him in terms to show sort of what people want in terms of when they drafted him, having the backfield potentially to himself, playing against the Chiefs, so being able to use both in the passing game, I think, as well as in the rushing game, even though that the Chiefs have been better as of late on their defense. But then also just getting by him, I like Deshaun Jackson out of Las Vegas. I mean, we saw him post a game last week on Thanksgiving against the Cowboys, but and then this week, I mean, they've needed somebody. The Raiders need somebody since, unfortunately, the unfortunate events with Henry Ruggs have left him sort of out. So they need a deep threat. With Waller gone this week, I could see them, Carr potentially throwing deep. I mean, again, we saw what Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett were able to do to Washington last week, and we know how that offense is going. So if you're able to put, Derek Carr out there and throw a couple balls deep to Deshaun Jackson, I could see him repeating sort of what he did last week, and people being very happy that they rolled with him rather than somebody else that, you had mentioned Van Jefferson earlier in the broadcast. Van Jefferson, somebody that I would probably play Deshaun Jackson over, just hoping that he gets what I think he can potentially have. So that would be the guy that I would call the sleeper of the week in terms of somebody who we could potentially get some points from that you wouldn't expect.
Gotcha. Big play, Deshaun Jackson. Always a fun sleeper for sure. One final question we have for you, just real quick, Mark. This comes from the chat room. Professor Hudson Reeve, he wants to know if you think Kyler Murray is going to play this week. It's interesting because they are in the 1 o'clock. Normally Kyler Murray is playing in these 4:05 and 4:25 games. He's actually playing in the 1 o'clock game this week. Ian Rappaport said earlier this week that Murray would play. But Cliff Kingsbury today said that Murray would be a game day decision. Mark, what's your gut telling you? Is Kyler Murray going to be out there on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I heard that he's, that they said that he's truly a game time decision. But there's also been reports that he is going to play. I am going to go under the assumption that he's going to play, because that's sort of what I'm hoping for. And so I don't know that there's any. I mean, I won't be able to give anything that other people can't read because unfortunately I don't have any insider information on the Cardinals. But hopefully he does play. I think he's been sorely missed for the Cardinals and for many fantasy players. I've got him on a couple of my teams that I could really use him this week. So. I'm hoping Murray plays. I've got one where I've got Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins, and so I'm trying to decide between those two because of the nice matchup that Cousins has. So, but yeah, I would say that I would say that he should play, or hopefully he will play, and sort of he's that game time decision, but will come out with no setbacks tomorrow or Sunday morning.
And a guy who's hoping that there are no setbacks in his lineups and his scores from here on out is indeed the fifth-place finisher in the 2021 Football Guys Players Championship regular season. He is Mark Fischer, good enough to join us on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour this week. Mark, thanks so much for your insight. We appreciate you dropping some knowledge on us tonight. Good luck the rest of the way. Hopefully the ball bounces your way, and maybe you'll be cashing a big-time check when this is all said and done at the end of the month.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, that's what I'm hoping, right? Is that things fall my way, and I get Deebo Samuel back right on time, week 15, and I can see hopefully my team rise up the ranks even more.
Keep pushing, Mark.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great night. Thanks so much.
You too.
Mark
Have
Fischer,
a good weekend,
ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you as well. Mark Fischer, the fifth-place team in the Football Guys Players Championship as the regular season has come to a close, and we have the league playoffs going on both this weekend and next weekend before that big sprint starts coming up. So, Farrell, good stuff from Mark there. I can't remember a team that this high up on the draft board rostering 4 defenses. But if there's one guy capable of pulling it off after talking with Mark, it certainly seems like he could be that guy.
He's got a plan, and I think he carefully goes. The Deshaun Jackson gives me a clue that he very, very carefully goes about putting the lineup together. He's talking about Deshaun Jackson. He says he would bench Metcalf and play somebody over him, and even though it's a hard move to make. I got to figure that when you line up against Mark, you're going to get real close to the perfect lineup every time, something that I certainly didn't master this year. It sounds like he does very well with it.
Let's get to some emails, some people that are going to try to help us put their perfect lineup together this week, and it starts with Art in Westland, Michigan. Hey, guys, is Derek Carr the better play over Russell Wilson this weekend? Farrell, I think I know where you fall in on this. I certainly am not seeing anything that gives me any kind of confidence in the Seattle passing attack right now. I was talking with Hudson in the chat room. I said, I think Metcalf has a good bounce back week. They said in the post-game presser that they need to get him the ball and to not really target him until the game was basically almost over is almost unheard of. So I do think he has a nice game. But even without Darren Waller, I'm still going to roll with Derek Carr this week. I think you talked about Foster Moreau at the top of the show. He's going to have a good game this week. Deshaun Jackson was a favorite for our guest tonight, Mark Fisher. So I'm going to roll with Derek Carr over Russell Wilson. How do you fall in on this?
Me too. He's got trusty Renfro that should have a big game. If you put together sort of what Samuel and what Humphreys and what Carter did, you can see that from that slot position, Washington team is very susceptible to numbers. Derek Carr is your quarterback over Wilson this weekend, Paul.
Let's talk about Howard in Chicago's email. Howard writes, would you roll with Boston Scott or Matt Breida on Sunday, fellas? Love everything you do on this pod. That is Howard in Chicago. So we did talk a little bit about Boston Scott earlier. I don't think he practiced again today, but it's a non-COVID illness. So I guess for me, Farrell, Buffalo offense is really good, and it seems like they're riding Matt Breida more than Zach Moss, who was a healthy scratch last week, and Devin Singletary. Right. So I think I'm going to go Breida here over Boston Scott.
We can go back to the weather report, too, which suggests a short passing game and a quick rushing attack. 27 touches for Breida so far, 176 yards, 3 TDs. I think this is going to become a trend in the league that players like Breida and Hilliard, who have fresh legs and can come in and jumpstart an offense at a position where other guys are struggling, it will be something that we'll see across the league. And I think next year when we go into fantasy, when we go into fab budgets, people are going to even be more reluctant to spend that money early as they save to see what players emerge in the double-digit weeks.
Yeah, and it's really crazy, what I've been able to get on the waiver wire the last couple of weeks, just really cheap guys because either, teams are out of it or nobody has any money left. So it's been great for me, but there is something to be said for that. That's something we will definitely explore as the offseason gets underway here within the next couple of months. Moving on, Bruce in Houston. Should I roll with Rashad Bateman in Pittsburgh or Cole Beasley against the Pats on Monday night? We talked with our guest tonight, Mark Fisher, who has Rashad Bateman in a lot of spots on his football guys teams and his FFPC teams. I think I probably would play him. I mean, it's close between him and Beasley, but I think I probably would roll with Bateman over Beasley this week in Week 13, Farrell.
In fantasy ball, you always say, well, I want to play the player that gives me the highest upside, that gives me the points. That's Bateman. If you think you've got a great lineup and we're moving into a weekend where 12 or 15 points is going to deliver the win for you, you need a solid performance, that's Beasley. Again, perhaps weather-related, guy that catches the ball close to the line and runs with the ball well after he catches it. He's had a string of down games, too. This could be the time where he bounces back.
And the final, I think we just got one more email. Yeah, one email. John in Pensacola, Florida. He writes, Dear Balky and Farrell, who is the correct tight end named Tyler for Week 13? Conklin or Higbee? So he's got a Tyler conundrum at tight ends here. And if you look at these players this week in their matchup, Higbee is at home against the Jaguars, and Conklin is on the road in Detroit. Farrell, I'm kind of at a loss on this one. This is one of those things where if you ask me today, I might change my mind tomorrow. Right now, I'm leaning towards Higbee. What do you think about that? Who would it be for you, Higbee or Conklin?
I want to try to get you to lean the other way, Balky, because Tyler Higbee has worn my patience. And if you look at the stats for this season, these players, Conklin came on much later as a contributor. Both of them have similar number of catches, similar touchdowns. Conklin has been a very, very beneficial tool for the Vikings around the goal line. Conklin still seems to get consistent targets and red zone opportunities on a team that is loaded with talent in the wide receiver world. And you take a look at what's happening in Los Angeles, and I think it's a product that the quarterback, we all assumed, especially after Higbee's year last year and the natural relationship that Stafford had with Hawkinson, we all assumed that Higbee and Stafford would step right back into that. It never has looked like it's clicked. And in Los Angeles, this is the perfect game for what I'm always talking about. What bothers me about the Rams coaching staff is that they take their foot off the gas. I think they're going to get ahead in this game and do the same thing again. They'll be comfortable winning by 10 or 12 points and scoring only 25 to 30 to do it. I just don't see a big game for Higbee and a potential game for Conklin. It's just part of a very powerful offense and a good matchup against the Lions.
I think you have successfully convinced me. I'm going to go with Conklin, and so to make it a clean sweep and easy on John in Pensacola, Florida. So go with Conklin over Higbee. Farrell, appreciate not only your insight into that, but all of the advice and everything you've shared tonight on the broadcast with both myself and Mark Fisher. Be good, and hopefully the ball bounces your way in the FFPC this weekend. We'll do this again next Friday, man.
See you then, Balky, and thank you.
Farrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. Fun contest. Hopefully you can be a part of that next year. Can't wait to get those drafts underway coming up in January. We'll have FFPC drafts going on in January too. Drafting season, it's just around the corner. But we got to settle this season up yet first, and hopefully we helped you set some lineups and make some roster decisions tonight in the correct way. You never know until the ball gets sprayed around the field on Sunday, but hopefully the ball bounces your way this week. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Mark Fisher. Thanks to Farrell Elliott. Thanks to the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and of course each and every one of you setting some time aside to listen to the program this evening or whenever you're downloading it, streaming it. 800,000 downloads. Wow, that is awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Remember to listen to the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown with Larry Weinauer. That's rotoviz.com/podcast. We will be back next Friday at 10/9 Central for a big Week 14 preview. Good luck in Week 13, both in the FFPC, the KFFSC, and quite frankly, the Football Guys Players Championship and any of your private leagues, anywhere you're playing. It's a fun time of year. Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and heard around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Awesome stuff from Mark Fisher tonight, and hopefully you took his words to heart. And I'll tell you what, I root for everybody on this show, obviously, as the inside joke is. But man, how cool would it be for somebody to take home a $500,000 grand prize, rostering 4 defenses on that squad. It would be a tremendous story, and Mark Fischer is only 4 spots away and a few weeks away from pulling it off. Thanks for listening, everybody. Appreciate each and every one of you for making some time in your schedule to listen to the show. We'll keep churning them out if you keep listening. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.